Hello and welcome back, Medicine family. We're incredibly excited to begin Medicine's June series, which we've decided to dedicate to women's voices. Kicking things off with the incredible Daiara Tukano and interviewing her, Jimena Paratcha. Given all the protests, marches, and this undercurrent of deep civil unrest and intersectionality being such a prevalent issue at the moment, we thought it was fitting to offer a strong and safe platform for the feminine voice to be expressed and heard. And that's what we aim to do with this June series. So for the month of June, we're going to honour and celebrate the voice of women. And hopefully we'll take you on a journey of exploring diverse perspectives from some truly phenomenal women on what hopes to be some of the most interesting and current issues of our time. So the full lineup can be found on our website, medicinefestival.com, if you want to check that out. But tonight, we're joined by Daiara as she shares Indigenous perspective on pandemic and the current situation. She was born in Sao Paulo and raised in Colombia, Paris, and Brazil. She's an artist, activist, educator, and above all, a communicator. I actually met Daiara last year with Jimena, and she held an extremely inspiring session, as I'm sure she will tonight. She's got a master's in human rights. She's a researcher on the rights of Indigenous peoples. She's part of the team that created the first Indigenous web radio station in Brazil. So a pretty amazing range of strings to her bow there. And tonight, she'll be interviewed by Core Medicine Council member Jimena Paratcha. Jimena has got an amazing range of things under her belt herself. She's worked in the social justice sector. She's campaigned for Ecocide Law, and she even helped initiate the Fossil Free campaign. And today she's helping establish the Akasha Retreat Center in Rio de Janeiro as a guardian of the traditions of the Yawanawa, the Hunikuin, and the Tukano, people of the Amazon. So please feel free to ask questions, and hopefully we'll have the chance to answer some at the end. And as always, please share away. And welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks very much. It's so really lovely to have you with us, Daiara. I'm just as interested in hearing what you have to say as I was when we met 3 years ago at the Yawanawa village of New Hope in the western part of the Amazon, and when I was absolutely fascinated by not only your vast wealth of knowledge, but your linguistic skills and being able to express yourself in English and French fluently. So I'm very excited tonight, and I'd like to just let our viewers know that this is the first time on Medicine online sessions that we're actually going to be able to raise funds. There's a donate button that I'm sure Zach will clarify later how to do that. But I'd love for you to let us know about where those funds will go before you start with your medicine of the word. And thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Jimena. Hello, everybody. My name is Daiara, and I'm really happy. Thank you for the invitation to be in this online medicine festival. So I am from the Tukano nation. We are one of the indigenous nations in Brazil that live in the upper north Amazon region, in the border between Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela, and that is actually one of the most affected regions with a very massive indigenous population that is struggling to face the pandemic of COVID-19. So the donations are directed to the FOIR, that is the Federation of Indigenous Organizations of the High Black River, and that is one of the oldest indigenous organizations in Brazil, and that attends more than 23 indigenous nations in a very extensive territory, and that is actually one of the most populated territories as well. So these donations are going to help many indigenous villages with communication, with transport for the infected ones, and to give medical assistance, like providing mask and alcohol and all the stuff, and trying to help also the health professionals that are dealing with this pandemic situation today. So I thank everyone that is going to support these families during this period. It's been really hard in Brazil. We are facing more than 500 years of pandemics, but this last pandemic is in the middle of a very hard situation of the advance of genocide in our territories, with a government that is really having a very severe speech of hate against indigenous population, and so every support is welcome and necessary. And here we are. So I'm a little shy. I went this morning to a protest here in Brasilia. I live in the capital of Brazil, and Indigenous Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. We are facing a genocide that has origin in a very complex story of colonization, of invading our territories, of denying our history, our identities, our cultures, and our bodies, our history, our memory. And this is also the memory of humanity. This is the memory of the world, and that relates a lot on how we see the world around us, how we relate to nature and to existence, and how we relate to ourselves. So it's interesting to have the opportunity to talk to you about a one very specific medicine, that is the word. I have the opportunity like to listen to lots of elders and medicine men and women. And lately I was listening to a cousin of mine, and he was explaining one more time that the first medicine of all is the word. And then came the plant medicine, then came the master plants. And why the word? Because following a path of spirituality is walking under the shadow of our own words. Is like being coherent, is have ethics, is have attention on how we relate to the world, and receiving all this apprenticeship, but making us better every day. And it's like an exercise. So I am an indigenous activist. Actually, I was born into the indigenous movement. I came from a family that has a really fantastic traditional knowledge, and I have had the opportunity to meet several other indigenous nations, and always gather with them in spirituality. We are a people of ayahuasca as well. The Tukano nation is one of the indigenous nations that lives in this beautiful Amazon forest and that has this powerful medicine that is the kahpi, ayahuasca, as is world known ayahuasca, but in our language it's called kahpi. And actually, as we are speaking to England, there was this this English botanic. We went to the, how was it called? The Kews Botanical Garden, Jimena. Yeah, where we have like the team that gave ayahuasca this name that was Banisteriopsis carpi, and carpi is a Tukano name. And actually, you have there in London a very antique collection of my nation's objects related to those knowledges that happened a long time ago. We were one of the first population that had that medicine, that was in contact with the Western civilization. Um, and like the white people came to our territory by 1630, and it was the beginning of a war against us that lasts for for centuries, and until the 19th and the 20th century, and even today. But in the 19th century, we had a very strong presence of the Catholic Church that that forbade uh, our languages, forbade our names, set our grandfathers and our fathers and mothers in I don't remember how you say it in English. Como que fala internatos?
Yeah, boarding
Boarding
schools.
schools. Yeah, boarding schools. Um, my father went to a boarding school. My grandfather did as well. In that time, everything of our culture was forbidden and was said to be devil, like from the devil, really. And our ceremonies, our ayahuasca ceremonies were forbidden as well. So everything we have today is is thanks to the resistance in hiding our knowledge. And now we are in a very different situation. Now somehow this medicine went global, and I'm here with you talking about all this. And so I had this opportunity to meet with lots of teachers, and we have in my family a very uh, strong family relation with the Yawanawa people. That's where we met with Jimena. And working as an activist and working as a researcher on human rights, and seeing like the story of everything that happened and still happening to our nation. I always ask myself, like, when are these peoples that are so curious about our culture and spirituality going to be more closely related to us, supporting our struggle? Because even if our culture is magnificent for sure, our daily life is full of struggle, is full of facing violences, and those are uh, very difficult even to explain.
And it's
For
a
me,
good point, Daiara. No, it's a good point, because a lot of people get to have the very minimal experience that is full of joy, and especially in ceremony, where is a lot of song and a lot of dance and the medicine and the healing. And not a lot of the experience of the actual everyday struggle, which is quite
Yeah.
intense. Yeah.
Yes, I know that there is people that sometimes had the opportunity or maybe the resources to go and visit an indigenous ayahuasca nation, like for ceremonies and going to a journey, like an indigenous journey in the forest, and try to discover everything. And it's beautiful, but it's something that is really set to be just turned to that kind of experience. And if you go to the daily life in an indigenous community, you are able to see that first of all, we are not just like enchanted beings of the forest. We are not fairies or something like that. We need to work a lot. People need to work a lot, like to provide the food and to provide education and security to our community. And also, I don't know if you imagine how is the reality of those populations, those indigenous populations that, for example, don't have the recognition of their own territories. Here in Brazil, we have indigenous peoples all over the country, not just in the Amazon. We have indigenous population that is facing the war, a very daily war to retake their territories, to be accepted in the land that they have inhabited forever. And those territories in one moment in history were like sold by the government. This is the story of colonization. In many spaces in history, the colonizers just denied our existence, denied our humanity, and took the land. And then took the land and sold the land. So mostly of the indigenous territories in Brazil, we know that the largest are recognized in the Amazon, but we have a very, very large population that is outside and has not right to anything of all. And this history is present all over the world, is present in every country, in South and North America, is present in every continent as well. Is not different from the situation, for example, that the Aboriginal people face in Australia. We have conflict, and we have conflict with the Western civilization, because this civilization came in our territory with this idea of colonizing and having a relation to the land that is a relation of property, like owning the land.
Yeah,
And
ownership. Yeah.
Ownership. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the support, Jimena. Yeah, this relation of ownership to the land is something that is really strange for us, because we don't relate to our territories as owners, but as children of these territories. We relate to the forest as our mother, to the rivers and mountains as our fathers and grandfathers. We have another kind of relation to the creation that is around us. We learn with nature, we learn with the plants, with the birds, with the animals. And we had managed to survive during centuries and millenniums before this invasion story, and we still survived in this 21st century as indigenous peoples with another idea on how it's possible to relate to the world and respect the rhythm of life that is around us. Um, and and mostly of our nations, I have been following lots of discussions about what is happening in this moment with humanity, uh, what is happening with this disease. This disease for us is just a symptom of a larger disease that is greater, that is really large than just a virus, and that it comes from the spiritual issue of this sickness that is trying to uh, exploit nature as if it was just an object or if it was just a resource. So part of our struggle is trying to find opportunities to share our visions, our cosmovisions, our philosophies, and our understandings on how we relate to ourselves and to the universe, how we relate to life. That's the reason why many nations, indigenous nations, had decided to, in one moment or another, to share their medicine. To share their medicine, to see if, like, having this experience, those white people, those people are going to understand something different. And that is an act of desperation in some kind. It's an act of a very strong generosity, like opening that is what is the most sacred and secret to us, opening the secrets and the oldest tradition to you, to trying to share a healing that we understand that is necessary for the Western world, but a healing that we understand that is necessary to us as well, because we have been hurt, because we cannot stand anymore to be hurting every day and facing this racism and this annihilation of who we are as indigenous. For me, it was never like I was born indigenous. It was never like a thing, you know. It's just normal. I belong to a nation. I was born in my family. But one day I decided to pay a little more attention to the history of my fathers and my family in the indigenous movement. Like, what happened? Why did my father needed to be out so long and so often, and what did he face, and what was the history that he was trying to transform? And it just happened when I was like turning into an adult, because when I was a little kid, I was just a little kid, and when I was a teenager, I was just a teenager. But one day I grew older and I paid attention to the history of my nation, and I understood that there was a great struggle that was going on, and I decided to jump in because I felt responsible as well. I understood that the new generations, like the young people, have responsibility on carrying a dream for the future, on carrying the idea that our reality can be different, that we can live with more dignity and freedom, that we can have respect. And then when I decided to do that, I went to visit. I had like this beautiful invitation to visit other indigenous nations, and I had the opportunity to visit people that lives like right in the south center Brazil, that is the Guarani Kaiowá, and they live in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, and there are like the population in Brazil that faces the worst. It's so sad when you know that your nation, that my nation lives in the actual core of the Amazon forest with really pure virgin forest that was untouched even by us. And when you go in another place and you see your indigenous relatives living in the borders of the roads and under plastic tents, running from bounty killers, trying to survive in camps that are attacked by fire and that live under the threat of daily life racism and denial, where they are really, really mistreating the cities. It's really hard to see a cemetery full of children, of indigenous children, and see that the beautiful forest that was once there was transformed into a sea of soybean or a sea of sugarcane. Those are one of the products: the soybean, the sugarcane, the cattle raising, that are the most important to the Brazilian agribusiness, and that makes the most of exportations to the Brazilian economy. Those products are stained with indigenous blood. We say in that region, the life of an indigenous children costs less than the life of a cow, cost less than a soybean plant. And it was really hard for me. I went there. I have seen with my own eyes. And the feeling of como é que fala luto, Jimena?
Struggle.
Como é que é?
Struggle.
Luto? Não,
Sim,
luto.
mourning.
Mourning.
Yeah, when you are
Yeah.
mourning, yeah.
The feeling of mourning can be really strong within indigenous populations, because it's like if we mourn 500 years of the assassination of our families and of our territories. The bearing this weight of genocide is really complicated, but it is within our spirituality that we find the strength to face it all. That experience was really important for me, because I had the opportunity to see these indigenous relatives in all this worst situation, and they were praying all the time. I saw the grandfathers and the grandmothers living with very, very little, and facing the fire that was set to burn their houses, and praying all night long. And in that praying, in the middle of that praying, they were sending all the best wishes to their enemies. They were not responding with a speech of hate to those that were insisting in killing them. They were praying and sending these farmers good energy, good thoughts, so they could be healthier and could be wiser to leave them alone and respect their lives. It's really different to have this ceremonial experience in the middle of a war, in the middle of a very, very violent attack, when you can hear, like, como é que fala? Os tiros de as balas perdidas, os tiros.
Stray bullets. Stray bullet. Yeah.
When you can hear the stray bullets, and when we can see the bounty killers, like, running in motorcycles and etc. I learned a lot because I understood that those grandfathers and grandmothers, they have such a strong spirituality that they can stand without getting mad, without getting crazy, that they understand the land so much and still love this beautiful Mother Earth and Father Sky, and they still love so hard those rivers that they will stand for them until the end. And so that's why we are still reuniting in the struggle to implement indigenous rights, to have public politics for indigenous peoples, our health and education politics. We are one of the most organized indigenous movements in the world. That is the Brazilian indigenous movement. And we have lots of partners as well. We understand that those that fight for climate justice and for the rights of nature are our partners. We understand that they are our friends because they are the ones that had the capacity to understand that we are all connected to nature. So that's why we need to go worldwide and try to find friends to support our families, to support our way of living, and try to find bridges to build a different thought, a different relation to the world.
Daiara, can I ask you to remind me and to tell our viewers, the Brazil indigenous movement, it was a small group of young men who started it, and one is your father and also your uncles. Now, and for those people who know Ailton Krenak and Brasilia, Nishwaka, it's nice to be reminded of the connection of who started the movement and who are still continuing with this movement, and you as a representative as well, taking the baton as a young leader yourself.
I don't like to consider me as a leader.
I will though.
No, please don't. The Brazilian indigenous movement was raised. Can you mute your microphone, please? Yeah, was raised in the middle of dictatorship times until 1979. In Brazil, indigenous peoples were considered to be incapable citizens, just as children, under the tutel of the state, without the right to even leave the country without an institutional authorization. We were considered less human and less citizens. And it was during that period that my father was born and my grandfather. They weren't considered whole, full citizens. They were incapable. And so my father was one of those men that decided to fight to gain, to conquer a full citizenship. And during the 70s and 80s, they went all over the country to gather indigenous leaders and have an effort to write and implement indigenous rights, indigenous constitutional rights. And so in the actual constitution that we have in Brazil, that was signed in 88, we had for the first time, a full chapter that recognized indigenous rights and the indigenous territories, the right to the culture, the right to the identity, and the obligation of the state to recognize the indigenous territories. Of course, it has been more than 30 years now, and not much has been done. We only have 30% of the indigenous territories that have been recognized by the state. And in the last years, we are facing a lot of attempts to reap these indigenous rights and try to not just reap the indigenous rights, but flexibilize the environmental rights to have an access to the indigenous territories and let in the industries of agribusiness and mineral exploitation. So today we have another organization that is not the same that was created during the 70s, but is a national organization that is called the Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, the APIB. That is our major space of representativity towards the national state institutions and also in the international institutions. I am part of a generation that has had the opportunity to occupy some more space in universities and have the tools to find other alternatives to collaborate somehow with the continuity of our nation. So yes, we have questions. Jimena, can you choose the questions?
No, I think I can't access that now. So go ahead, Zach.
How do indigenous communities tend to their grief? As I was saying, is something that is really complex. If you go and look, for example, to the rates of suicide and alcoholism in the middle of indigenous populations, you can easily understand that we face a lot of struggle in mental health issues that are related to depression, grief, and sadness, all caused by racism, the denial of our territories, the absence of public politics to our communities, and that is a very clear part of this project of genocide against indigenous peoples that is present all over the world because of the model, como que fala modelo de consumo?
Consumption, model of consumption.
Because of the model of consumption.
Consumerism. More.
Because of this need that this Western society has to consume and exploit the last territories that are indigenous territories. The indigenous territories all over the world gather more than 80% of biodiversity. We are not just territory for indigenous human beings. Our territories are territories of life. Those are unexploited territories, and this Western society still wants to exploit us. And so the only way that we have found to face this grief is actually spirituality, but you cannot imagine how hard and difficult it is, because we have many populations that are in como que fala? In misery. In misery. I was trying to find another word, but misery has been settled in our territories. These are populations that have very little access to drinkable water, to education, to public health. These are populations that are still facing racism every day, and that have been empowered, like put into a relation as in poverty. They are considered to be poor because the Western society doesn't recognize that we have full of richness by our side, but that is not just money, it's not just gold, but we are pushed every day to fit into that system, into that capitalist system, and so we are poor, and very probably we will always be, because if we lose everything that we have, that is our cultural identity and our territories, there is no space for us in the Western society. The space that Western society has prepared to indigenous population is the space of slavery work, is the space of being marginalized, is the space that be a very, very base working class that will never attain the privileges that has been took and maintained in a very, very little population in the world. And this population is still the same. It's still the same, and I am sorry for being so frank and direct, but that is who I am. And all the privileges that you folks have in Europe, that still kind of maintains the genocide down here. So we really need to connect and try to figure how to make our sustainability different, and manage to find the prosperity and the respect in diversity, in biodiversity, in cultural diversity, and in dignity for every nation. Do you have another question?
Someone is asking if you could share an Indigenous song prayer. And I know we spoke about the moment you're living and why you're not feeling to sing. And I thought you might just want to share on that, particularly with the losses within your family recently.
I came from a culture where in the ceremonies, our ceremonies are actually more spoken than singed. Here it is a space of ceremony as well. And I am in mourning. I have lost two persons of my family, and it's not considered to be good to sing in these moments in life. When we mourn, we need to take very care of our energy. And so I will not sing, sorry. I prefer to do it like, como que fala, presencialmente?
In person, yeah.
Yeah, in person, and I hope that we will find other opportunities to share the songs. But I think this is a good opportunity to share good words. And so, good words, yes. In my nation, we have lots of different medicines. We have ayahuasca, we have the tobacco as well, we have the rapé, we have other kinds of rapé that is like the parika, that I don't know if, I don't think it has a name in English. We have the pepper, the chili pepper, that is considered to be a medicine as well. We have the coca leaf, that is a medicine as well. And with the coca leaf, we do the mambe, that is the medicine of the word. And so we share all those medicines all the same, one after the other, during the whole night of a ceremony. And the intention is always to be very concentrated, awakened, and connected to every little word that is shared in those spaces. I think we have more questions. Let me see. In my opinion, what is an ethical way for a white Western person to help indigenous communities without imposing their own view of the world? To help, not to harm. I don't know what is like IA, but okay. Stay as far as possible from the colonial framework. I don't know. Hein, Jimena, me explica pouco essa pergunta. I'm trying to understand. Like, I try to speak in English, but I'm not a good English speaker, so.
Não, ela está falando se como é que pode contribuir uma pessoa branca, assim, colocar o ponto de vista, né, do mundo ocidental em cima, né, dos indígenas.
Oh, I believe that there are several ways to contribute and to be a partner. In whatever different culture that we go, we need to pay very much attention and try to understand how people behave, like how women and men behave, to understand how to be proper to them, and go little and by little, like silently paying attention and understand how other culture communicate, and ask questions, and understand that the multiplicity of cultures is a multiplicity of epistemologies, is a multiplicity of thoughts, that maybe when we are from a cultural world, in the other culture, we will find things that we won't never understand, because every culture has like their own como é que fala? Just a minute. Concepts. A different culture can have a different concept for richness, for love, for freedom. We can have different concepts that we cannot translate because they don't exist in Western society, and that is okay. That is okay. I think that the best way to support indigenous peoples is supporting them politically, The political support goes through the economical support by two sides. It's like how we can get the indigenous communities an income, but also how our consumption is responsible for the violations that are done to indigenous peoples. And so, as for example, and that is an agreement in every indigenous movement from North to South America, is, for example, the divestment, the urgence of the divestment into of the mineration market, mining market, as the oil, fuels, and also the agribusiness. Like, not, please don't buy Brazilian sugarcane, don't buy Brazilian soybeans or soy food, and don't buy Brazilian meat, because that is the industry that is killing us the most. Just avoiding that kind of consumption, you are helping a lot. And if you have interest to collaborate in projects with indigenous populations, with the specific groups or villages or stuff, remember that we are as capable as you are, that we are intelligent, contemporary people, and that all the projects that are related to our people are meant to be directed by us. The protagonism, the autonomy that has been denied, historically denied to us, is necessary. We know that is what is best for a nation. Every nation has a different kind of organization towards their leadership or how they organize, to simply. And having the space of listening to each different nation, and giving maybe a technical support to achieve their objectives, granting their initiative, their protagonism, and their autonomy is really important. Yeah. And in that kind of relation, we can find always like these big treasures that are the alternatives that can be shared with the other cultures as well, on how to build things differently.
So, Daiara, even the organization that you're today hoping to raise funds for, the Formine, it started from it was Elisangela Bare, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a group of women.
Yeah, actually, the FOIN is an indigenous organization that is the Federation of the Indigenous Organizations of the High Black River, Alto Rio Negro. And your microphone is doing an echo. Yeah. And this organization is an indigenous-led organization. It's an indigenous organization. So they have their councils. In the councils are representatives from different indigenous villages, from different indigenous nations, and they do the management of what they think that is urgent and necessary. And that action that we are trying to find donations is an action that is led by women, by indigenous women, because it's actually the women that take care of their families in that kind of situation. So women know that food is needed, women know that transport is needed, women know how to take the best care of sick people, women know that it is very urgent to administrate this situation, and so it is led by women from 23 different indigenous nations, and that attends more than 700 indigenous communities in the borders of those rivers.
Yeah, so in answer to that question, I mean, this is a very good way of supporting without imposing, because it was born from Indigenous people and from the mothers and the grandmothers, from the women themselves. So yeah, hopefully this will be a good inspiration to do that here tonight.
Yeah.
So
Do you have
we have
another question?
yeah, I think hopefully, can you see them there when they're written? Because I don't have it here. Yeah?
Yeah, I can see them.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's where. There you go.
How do you get this spirituality into the leaders of this huge mechan? Oh, okay, mechan. Of course. To create a change for the better. I think we do it all together. We managed to do it like using different languages. I believe a lot in the strength of art, for example, in the strength of culture, how to seed ideas and feelings into the heart of the people, how to educate the youngest generations. I believe, for example, that when we see like the Fridays for Future movement of the Extinction Rebellion, I know that it is a young generation that has had access to many contents, cultural contents, educational contents, even like, I don't know, comic books or animations that have told them how important it is to relate to nature and how beautiful nature is. So there are many ways. And for the adults, maybe remembering, never losing the enchantment that we have for life as children, because I believe every children is really crazy about nature. Never lose that, and understand that in adulthood and in our civic rights, we have a lot of power to choose representatives that have this same compromise to nature rights. Yeah. I
Thank
don't know
you,
if
Daiara. And the connection you made before about making allies with these organizations and how important it is, it seems like that is a connection with this last question. I guess it was perhaps pointed at what we can do, you know, a big time against, I guess, the agribusiness machine. But as you say, you come back always to the essence, no? That we reconnect with ourselves and with being nature ourselves and connecting to nature, and hence, you know, defending the rights of nature, and these allies being so important to you and to Indigenous people generally. I just want to remind our viewers that when we are contributing to these type of associations and organizations, as the artists for Amazonia rightly said, you know, you are protecting the protectors, the natural guardians of the forest, which we all depend on. And so I hope that you consider this. I know in these times there's been a lot of requests and finances are tight for everyone. We're in this crazy pause in this time where there's really the unknown is never been so prevalent. You know, I think my youngsters have been saying how it's been so good to be more present. It forces you to be completely present. And this is true. We can't project forward as much as usually we were very used to doing. Everything is more up in the air and open, and this creates a lot of fear. And so on top of it, people are being even more careful with finances. But if you consider that basically, you know, the natural guardians of the forest are carrying treasures that are just knowledge and wisdom and traditions that go every time they are going, you're helping them to stay alive. You're helping to stay these traditions and the knowledge and the wisdom to stay alive. And hence, as the guardians of the forest, and we depend on the forest, it's helping us stay alive. So please consider this when you're thinking of what you can give. And Zach, clarified that the button for donating is in the description of this event this evening. And so, yeah, please be as generous as you can with all these considerations. And Daiara, you've just recently been to visit your family, before the pandemic. So it was the birthday of your grandfather or your great-grandfather? I can't remember.
Yeah, my grandfather has his birthday of 110 years old, and so he's doing well. He's a young man of 110, and it was really special to be there. He is the eldest of our nation, and he has been through a lot. And I had this opportunity to visit like lots of sacred places of our indigenous territory, and it was a very important initiation and lesson, and to see where my father was born and my grandfather was born, because as I was sharing with you, I was born in the middle of indigenous movement. I was born in the city. I was raised far away from where my grandfathers live, and I didn't have the opportunity to learn into the very, very ideal traditional way, and that is part of history. That is part of what has been done to us. I had this right to being raised within my family taken away by the struggle for indigenous nations, and that's why I can be here, like speaking in English, or I could be speaking in other languages. That doesn't really matters, but I am not less indigenous because of that. And it was a really big dream of mine to be able to go and see my grandfather, like with all this experience. And he is such a cheerful one and sings a lot and is always smiling and tells lots of stories. And he was in ceremony like until 5 a.m. in the morning. Like, he is really strong for his age. And it was beautiful to see these wide, wild, virgin forests, rainforests, full of all the birds and all the stories and all the songs, and this beautiful river where you can see the reflection of the stars in the river and just listen to that and understand a lot of things. And it's really brutal how different it is from living here in the city. It is an experience that gives a lot of like, it's a rich experience, but it has lots of joy, and at the same time lots of sadness. It was really painful to go to those places where we had the largest wars in our territories, and where so many people were killed or so many children were abused. And those are historical places, and our nation still lives there, and my family still lives there. I was really sad recently. I am mourning. It was really frustrating, and like, I was really afraid of the possibility of the COVID getting to those territories, but it arrived. That disease went into the most isolated indigenous land, because it goes with the illegal miners. Como que fala garimpeiro em inglês?
Yeah, miners.
Yeah, illegal miners. And it goes there with the drug traffic. It goes there with the wood cutters. It goes there with those that doesn't respect the limits of our territories and that just are there. And it is so cruel to know that all this illegality, what is illegal, crosses our territories with much more freedom than what is legal, because we don't have like a health system that is present in those territories. We don't have an education system either. We don't have even good communication. We have some little radio stations in some communities, and people go there by boat, like in their canoes, and try to have a little more information. And you don't imagine how difficult it is to explain to those peoples what is COVID-19. And then so we are working on all that, like trying to have communication. This activity is one of those actions. It's to communicate the reality of the struggle that we are facing, and trying to get the support to have an emergency action with our communities. The two persons that I lost in my family were two uncles of mine, like a grand uncle and an uncle. They were both cousins to my father, and they were medicine men. They were like big teachers. They were living libraries. They were masters of our history and songs and ceremony. They were us artists that were a reference to me, and they were gone. And I am really afraid that for my grandfather. So I'm getting a little emotional. And do you have another question? Hey, Jimena.
No, I think it's fair enough to stay with this emotion, Daiara. You know, I'm sure everyone who's watching is just as sorry as I am for your loss and for the loss to your people, to these particular medicine men who are such a library of knowledge and wisdom and song and tradition. And so just to say, I'm so sorry for this loss, and I'm sure everyone is feeling the same. And I guess it would be interesting for people to also to understand this, maybe a bit of detail of the initiations that you have gone through, and particularly in this recent visit, if there's anything you would like to share about this, and how you feel the evolution of your work and your training has come along.
I don't know if I want to share because I can talk about another thing. Is as a human rights researcher, I have years of studying and working with the cultural heritage, the immaterial and material cultural heritage of indigenous nations. And we are in a moment of lots of concerns with the globalization of indigenous medicines and the effects that our communities have with this globalization. And when I say the medicine, I speak mostly of ayahuasca and also the tobacco, also the rapé. Some years ago, I was part of the group that initiated the Indigenous Conference of Ayahuasca here in Brazil, in the state of Acre, with the Ashaninka, Yawanawá, Hunicuin, and other indigenous peoples from the Amazonian Brazilian region. And we already had like 3 indigenous conferences that have been spaces of debating to debate the complexity of the globalization of the medicines and alternatives to use the opportunity of connection to the world to have good partnerships, but also paying lots of attention on how these exchanges are transforming our culture as well. Como que fala monetarização, Jimena?
Monetizing.
The monetizing of the medicines, the kind of market that has been created from that, the growing wave of new shamanistic groups that are mixing indigenous traditions in really weird ways that we don't always agree with, because every nation has their tradition, and those traditions are just not traditions into this is science, this is medical science, this is technology, this is research, centuries of research, and the ones that we consider to be doctors, like the medicine man or women, are people that have dedicated years and years and years and years to research and practice of this medical path. The same way that if you want to be a doctor, like, or a good surgeon, you need to go to school and for many years and do specialization. Is the same thing for shamans, and so in our nations today, we have very few of those teachers. We have very few doctors, and in some cases, with this globalization and with this monetizing of the medicines, some communities have found like an income that has incentivated young people to go and learn their culture. That is really good. But I don't know if that is done for the good reasons. Because spirituality is not just like having like the feathers or the the earrings or the necklaces or posing as a medicine man. Spirituality is a posture in life. It's not about who plays better the guitar and who has the best voice. It's about how you walk in life with humility, with truth in your heart, and how much coherence you have between your words and your actions. And the globalization of the medicine has put us to face the contradictions of the Western culture as well. For example, I don't know if you know that the Kambo, like the frog medicine, comes from a frog that is actually really really under menace, is almost extincted, in extinction, and but people in other countries are really fond of this medicine, and as long as you buy it, indigenous families that live in poverty are going to sell it. That is awful. One day, if that is still growing in that way, we won't have that medicine of the frog anymore. We had lots of discussion on the sustainability of ayahuasca in our forest as well, because we need to begin planting, like harvesting the vine to have a vine for us. It's really It's really absurd that we have more non-indigenous people that drink ayahuasca than indigenous persons. That is true as well. And you can find in several countries, not only Brazil, not only the Indigenous Conference of Ayahuasca in Brazil, but also institutions from Colombia and from Peru, of indigenous leaders that making their points on what is happening with this globalization of ayahuasca. And that's why the first medicine, as I was saying, is the word. We are really happy and we really like to share the medicines that we have. It's not, I'm not telling you like don't drink it anymore, like no, it's not that. But maybe we need to pay attention on every learning that we have in medicine circles with indigenous medicines, and really go into the hard part that is doing this exercise in the daily life to be better, to understanding how important is to face the complexity of our own, to find the courage and the flexibility to question the paradigms of our society, to have the courage and the sensibility to heal our memory and to make agreements with our past and be the best ancestors now. We talk a lot about ancestrality, like the ancestral indigenous knowledge or whatever. We need to understand that if you want to follow on a spiritual path, this thing consists in being good ancestors now for the future, for those that are coming after us. It may be not be is not easy, but it's an exercise. It's an invitation, and just be like transparent with ourselves and try to get free of the illusions that we can make of ourselves as well. We make a lot of illusion of ourselves and a lot of illusions about the others. And this culture, this Western cultures, has put us into little boxes, little tiny boxes, or with little labels upon us. We must to rethink those labels and those boxes and think outside the box, and find in existence in our daily life living um, an impulse, an energy, a happiness, a love for life, to do every day better, to make every day better, because the future doesn't exist. We are just here now, and living each day with the best purpose is really following the possibility of living into spirituality. For those, we just need to recognize our capacity of being intelligent beings. We are intelligent beings. We talk a lot. Maybe in this internal dialogue, we find the opportunity of build our own wisdom and be wise beings as well. Wise beings that know, that understand that our health is under our responsibility, that we need to rest well and eat good things and be nice to each other, because everybody likes to be well treated, and find generosity with ourselves to share to the others, in very little things. And talking to ourselves is the best way to get there. When a medicine man, when a shaman goes through all the trainings and specializations and diets and everything and stuff, he gets to a point that where it's not necessary anymore to drink medicines or to take medicines all the time, because he has already understood them. He is able to connect to the wisdom of a plant and call the essence of the plant and work with it. Is amazing. He can do it with the frequency of his thoughts, of his intention, with the energy of his intelligence that is connected to the intelligence of the plant, to the intelligence of the water, to the intelligence of the earth. And to get connected to that intelligence, we only need to train a lot to listen to that. We learn by example, and the world, everything in the world around us is an example. Nature is the example of life itself, and it's not that difficult to get to that conclusion. So I believe that is mainly what indigenous cultures and perspectives share with the Western civilization. And as indigenous, we are really, really diverse. We are more than 5,000 indigenous nations all over the world. Those nations gather more than 80% of biodiversity. We are cultural diversity. We understand the richness into diversity, and into diversity is to live well with those that are different from us. We don't need to be all the same, because when we are different, we can be constantly in love with each other. So that was my word. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Daiara. Really appreciate you making the time this evening in England. And yeah, sorry for the echo from the microphone on my side. I'm in the middle of Bahia in Brazil, and just getting the tech set up at all was quite an operation. I really appreciate everything you're bringing, and to remind us to observe nature, particularly to bring us into harmony. And I have an urgent question from a core member of our medicine council, which brings us into a different realm of things. But if we can finish with this, and to remind us of the organization that is now, the donate button is in the description and is the stream. And you have a question. There it is. It's from Remy, the one I was going to say.
Traduz para mim, Jimena.
Que é inspirador ouvir como sua avó e seus avós conseguiram ficar centrados e não loucos, para usar as palavras. Por mais que tudo que sofreram, e tudo a raiva e a angústia que está no mundo neste momento, entendivelmente. Mas como que eles guiariam a gente? Qual seria a sabedoria que eles usariam, compartilhariam para nos ajudar neste momento e para ir para frente?
Well, okay. I am under training. The first one, the like in my nation, traditionally, the space of ayahuasca is really masculine. It's meant to man, and it is like kind of a taboo, like a woman drinking ayahuasca and stuff. But well, my father is really connected to several churches and new shamanic groups and stuff, and women drink ayahuasca. Like white women drink much more ayahuasca than white men, and much more ayahuasca than indigenous women, actually. And when we get to the point where he was explaining and like talking a lot about our history, me and my sisters went to him and like asked him like, yeah, you know, what about the women and stuff? And he was like, everybody is intelligent. If you want to learn about something, just go for it. And if you are here before the man, I will teach you. And so that was how we get into having this kind of education. And there was a point where I began doing my diets and my trainings, and I went all the time through those perceptions of the world and history, and I still I deal a lot with the grief and the anger and stuff because of all that violence I was talking about. And I still always impressed on how the elderly are really, really centered. Oh my God, like they seem like superheroes to me because even when they are sad or yeah, they have human feelings, but they are centered. And I have learned a lot with elderly people. My mother told me my whole life that they are like three kinds of persons: those that learn with their own mistakes, those that doesn't learn with their mistakes, and those that learn with the mistakes of the others, with the history of the others. And so that's why the word is such a good medicine. It can prevent us to go into suffering as well. It can learn us to deal with suffering. It can give us advice on how to release us from suffering. And I believe that is what they do, like observing life and death to be more acceptance of life and acceptance of death, and understand that everything makes part of creation, that the world is a constant transformation. We talk about transformation all the time. When we pray in our prayers, for example, when I don't know, I believe many of you have learned or heard prayers about the serpents, about the importance of the anaconda. We are a nation of the anaconda. The anaconda is we are sons and daughters of the anaconda, and the idea of the anaconda is transformation itself. Is being able to change our skin and renew ourselves, um, in and living into the impermanence of the present, of today, and knowing and learning how to be grateful for each day, and take the learnings of these days that we have gone through to the next. And just breathing as in transformation. I would like to share, I know that I don't know how many time we have left, but I'd like to share with you a little bit of the story of the origins of our nation, of the Tukano nation and many other nations that are in the same canoe. The story tells that in the beginning there was nothing. It was like nothing, like this. And then in this moment appeared the first blow, the first thaw, like a thaw. And this is the Great Spirit. And this spirit is feminine. That was how the grandmother of the universe self-created herself, a great grandmother of the universe. And she created the medicines, took the medicines, and began thinking about how to create life in the world. And so with her blow, She created a spirit that has no body, that has no matter, that is just spirit. And this spirit is her brother, and he is male. He is the grandfather of the universe. And together, they created what is material and immaterial. They created a universe that has several layers, where she, with her body, created the earth and the water from her breast, like from her milk, and the great grandfather of the universe created the sun and the intelligence that is in every single life. He created the fishes and the animals, and then humankind. And this humanity came from the spiritual world to the material world, traveling in a serpent canoe of transformation. That is the Pameri Yukese. Pameri Yukese is one of the names that we give to the anaconda. This canoe of transformation is a spirit of transformation, of movement, of life that goes all over the planet. We understand that this canoe of transformation is the energy of the Amazon River, that is the water that flows upon the earth, but is also the water that goes into the sky, bringing the water that is needed to life. That's why the Amazon forest is so important, because it is the heart that flows that water. Without the Amazon forest, our planet would be turned into a desert. We understood, observing nature, that every element is important, and that every being is part of this transformation. We understood that we are not more important than a worm of an ant. Actually, the worms and the ants, they do much more for the earth than we do. They make the earth breathe. They make the earth be able to flow in her veins the water that we need for be living and drinking. So life is transformation itself, and we can be able to connect to this idea and just be part of it, be part of life. That's my website. I have some videos that are in English that Jimena, we went to the university. I don't, it's like UCL. I have some speeches and some texts in English, but mostly is in Portuguese. And I also have my artwork there. That is the way that I have found for living and to contribute with the continuity of the story of my nation. We tell the stories with art, with drawings. We tell the stories with music, because we have learned to sing with nature as well. Pitisa said, the way that we educate ourselves is similar to the way that birds train their little birds to sing, just talking and repeating the old stories of creation. And humanity has a beautiful story everywhere. Beautiful story in the greatness and the happiness and in the sadness. But it's important to have memory. Never forget that we also are part of life. And that is important, that what we do, everything that we do is creating words, that we can create an economy that is turned to death, a politic that is turned to death, a necropolitic, a necroeconomy, but that we are also able to create an education, a politic, an economy that is turned to life, to value life and build life within ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Daiara. Gratidão, sinceramente, que bom.
Anyo.
Thank you so much. And you. And just like Daiara said, like a little bird, you can click on the link below and to understand more about this incredible organization that Daiara has put forward today. It cares for 23 different indigenous peoples in the High Black River and more than 700 communities. So I think it goes without saying that there's a treasure of knowledge and wisdom and tradition in indigenous peoples, and who not only are living more in harmony in nature, but are carrying all of this. So by protecting the actual people, you're protecting the forest, you're protecting ourselves. So please, let's do what we can and remember this invaluable resource that is that's so necessary in these times that we're living now. So yes, thank you everyone for viewing, and I'd just like to send a lot of strength and blessings with a lot of love to everybody at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of love to you as well. Be good in this quarantine. Take care of the children, take care of the elderly, and be good in family.
Yeah. And